Hello and welcome to the Virtual Nature School. I'm Claire Warden and I'm working with you today to think a little bit more around the idea of circles, spheres and spirals. Now you may remember that we explored spirality, this idea that spirals exist in the natural world. And today we're moving forward our inquiry in response to some of our members of our community about looking at how we could explore this. Now this is a basket and it's almost hard to imagine what the relationship is between this basket and a spiral. Let's have a look at the film and see if that helps us understand.
Welcome to our inquiry where we've been exploring circles, spirals and spheres. Once again, we've been out there being nature detectives. Some of us have been drawing in our memory books and writing down all of the things that we've seen. We've done drawings of snails. We've done drawings of beautiful round slug eggs. We've been out there and being really careful at the way that we look at the natural world. By drawing in your memory book, it means you can remember and you can look back and think about of all the amazing things that we've been doing. When we look at spirals, we can make them with all sorts of different things. And so we've been exploring using the chalk, and then we've added more detail to our chalk by looking at leaves. And we've used different size leaves to make our spiral shape here. We've found spirals that have appeared when we've been using wood. And as we've been whittling, we've been noticing that the shape that comes off is often a spiral. This beautiful spiral has been found on the beach. People have been talking a lot about spiders, and so something you might want to do is looking at the spider's webs that you've got. Because we look at them and we always think they're spirals, but actually when you look very closely, some of them are not made of spirals. They're made in a whole variety of different ways. This one has got circles that have been looped around. This one is a spiral, and so when we look at the way that the spider has made it, we can follow the line around. And so it starts very small in the middle and goes further and further out. This is called an orb spider. And one of the beautiful things about orb spiders is that they're very cleverly made, because you've got to ask your question, why is it that the spider doesn't stick to the web? It could be something that you researched. So when we've been looking at how we've been able to use our ideas, we've used plasticine and we've put shapes in it and we've been able to do some weaving. And sometimes our weaving will take days to complete, and that's okay because projects that are slower often ask us to slow down. It means that we're thinking and using our brain quite hard. We can see from this photograph our friend Thomas is really concentrating. And so not everything you do in an inquiry is going to be easy. Some things you're going to have to work at. So in our talking tub, one of the things that I was asked to look at was how do you make a basket? Because as we've been looking at spirals, we've been talking about weaving. Well, these are all baskets and they're all different in the way that they are made. In the old days, all the baskets that we had were made by people. They were made by humans and they were using different materials to make them. They've all got the idea of the spiral shape, and it's only about how hard you pull on that that actually bends the sides up of your basket. So here's one that was made at a camp, and you can see here that the big straight up stems have gone down the side and across the bottom and up the other side. And so as you're making or you're weaving, if you pull it a bit tighter, it brings those sides up and makes a little bowl. And then at the end, you add on a long piece of spiral twine or a little bit of bent wood to make your handle. Do you remember we looked at that frame? Well, that is the frame for a basket. And so this very simple picture, you could take those circles, and if you made your circles of different diameters, you can bring up the sides of your sticks. And that way you end up with a bowl. By putting those sticks into that wood, you give a really firm base. But the previous picture you saw, they used plasticine or they might have used some foil. There's all sorts of different things you can do to tie those sticks together in the middle of your bowl or your basket. So here is a plate. It's very flat, and so what we needed to do is to turn this into a basket was pull a bit tighter on the sides, and gradually those long straight bits will come up and make it into a bowl shape. You never know when you might need a basket. And we know that we love rocks. And so what better way to make a basket than to do it yourself and then put your collections in it, whether it's spirals you found or a beautiful rock museum like this. People have been having a go at sowing grass. Now, the thinner the grass, the easier it is to manipulate, to move around. So we found it quite tricky, and we found that it was much better if we worked together to make that little basket or to make the little plate. You remember we talked about the idea of making a giant target, and many of you have shown me your targets that you've made, and you've color coded them so that you've got different numbers for getting onto the red or the blue or the green. So it's going to be great for mathematics when we start to play with our games. One of the things you've learned is all about wrapping and whipping that bit of wool or string around a stem. Well, where the little yellow arrow is here, that is the handle on a bow and arrow, and they can be made out of leather or they can be made by wrapping the string around it. Here's somebody who's made their own bow and arrow. And we've got a nice long piece of flexible wood, and then we've got a very straight piece that's going to make the arrow. So you can see he's having to hold on to the bow, and that's where you would put your whipping, and then he pulls back the string. So there's got to be quite a lot of tension in it if you're going to make a bow and arrow. Here are some that have been made where we've looked at different shapes and we've started to make them our own by wrapping more bits of string around them. If you wanted to, you could always make yourself a little bag to keep your arrows in, because when you've worked so very hard to peel off the bark, to maybe add some feathers to them and made sure that they're well attached by just wrapping that string around, you don't want to lose them. And so having a bag is called a quiver, and it's a really good idea to keep your arrows that you make nice and safe. In the old-fashioned arrows, they used to have a feather along the edge. You might enjoy finding feathers to attach to a stick because you can just throw sticks and see where they go. You don't need to make the bow. If you're going to make anything like that, you're going to need to find a long stick. You're going to need to find short, straight sticks to make your arrows. You're going to need some string, and you're going to need some scissors and a grown-up to help you pull the tension into that long stick. Now, there are some things that we need to talk about, because when you're using things like sticks or bows and arrows or swords or any of those things, they're really good fun. And that's the good thing about making them. They're great to use. We really enjoy them. But there are some tricky things that you're going to need to think about. One of the tricky things is that if you were to point them at somebody, they may hurt them if you let go. So the tricky thing is to make sure that you're not pointing at somebody, that you don't hurt them in some way. So what we do is that we have a procedure, and that means there are ways of keeping ourselves safe. So what do we do to make sure that our arrows don't hit anyone by accident? Well, what we do is we make our own archery space, and that means we make hazard tape that's bright red and white, and it goes down the sides in a long string to make sure that people realise it's where we're going to be using our archery. So we have a target at one end and we have our bows and arrows at the other end. And that means nobody walks in front of somewhere where you're throwing your stick. I look forward to seeing you all in the virtual classroom.
So wasn't that fascinating? One of the things when you look at most baskets is that when you look closely, you can see inside are these big pieces of internal framework. They're those branches that we looked at in the film. And then you can see that actually the person who's made the basket has gone round and round and round in a giant spiral. And then at the end, they've added on their basket. And look what they've done to the handle. They've actually wrapped bits of grass around the handle. So that's another spiral. So I look forward to seeing all of your baskets, what shape they are, how deep they are, what materials you decide to use, because containers and basket making could take us off on an inquiry all by itself.